Hello, Internet. I'm so glad you could join me today. Please, pull up a seat. Relax. Have yourself a nice warm drink. In the Café der Pedanterie, you're among friends. Pretentious, nerdy, owly friends. Comfortable? Good. Then we can begin. Badass. Name me a few things you think of when you see or hear that word. Sunglasses, motorcycles, holding a gun sideways, explosions, ninjas, not giving a fuck, taking out a room full of armed thugs without breaking a sweat. A ninja with sunglasses riding a motorcycle away from an explosion set off by shooting a gun sideways into a room full of armed thugs, taking them all out without breaking a sweat or giving a fuck. Abraham Lincoln. Chances are, if that name and badass are associated in your mind, either you're a history major, for which you rightfully deserve a place on the list of badassery, or you're familiar with a certain recent work by Mr. Seth Grahame-Smith, either his original 2010 novel or the 2012 film adaptation. That work is, of course, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. Its premise is like a joke. It is a joke. What could be more ludicrous than Honest Abe using deadly axe kata to take out legions of the undead, and also to make trees explode? This idea is more akin to something one would find on an ironic hipster t-shirt than the subject of a full-length work. Grahame-Smith knew this from conception to execution, readily admitting that the title is a joke. Despite this, he chose not to go the route of outright comedy, which one would think would be the obvious way to sustain such a premise for longer than, say, 2 seconds. He says of the premise,
"It's very easy to fall into doing it as a lark and making a joke of the whole thing. What we chose to do, and what I chose to do in the book, is to take an absurd premise and treat it very seriously and do it very straightforward. We never wink at the audience and say, 'Ha ha, we know how silly this all is.'"
This is what gives the property a higher degree of badass than it might otherwise enjoy. The task of taking an absurd premise and crafting it into something that has any semblance of seriousness and believability can in itself be badass. From there, badass rubs off on the work itself, with the serious tone not cheapening the over-the-top elements the way a joking tone would, and thus making the over-the-top elements seem more awesome than comical. Are you following me so far? Well, let's back up a moment and talk a little more about what exactly makes someone or something badass. In a broad sense, badass is a substitute for the word awesome, and I am not referring to awesome in the sense of
like totally an awesome 80s featuring an awesome Atari game control,
but in the traditional sense of the word, meaning inspiring awe. Any one of the entries on our brainstorming list could be said to inspire awe. People who wear sunglasses often call to mind rebels, and people admire rebels for carving their own paths, not letting anyone get in their way. Motorcycles have many of the same associations, and are powerful, impressive machines in their own right. Explosions are perhaps the epitome of awe itself. The word is without point, however. It is indistinguishable from awesome. The word badass is often used to refer to things that are awesome. It is more often used as a noun that refers to a specific person. A badass with a capital B, as it were. For example, Indiana Jones is badass. The Bride is badass. Black Widow is a badass.
I'm in the middle of an interrogation. This moron is giving me everything.
And of course,
you told him to keep an eye out for me.
Black Dynamite is a badass.
I threw that
shit before I walked in the room!
So in that sense, the concept of badassery is inherently tied to badass people, and the things such people are associated with. However, this is still a very broad concept, and indeed what is badass to me may not be badass to you. So for the sake of this video, let us pin down a more specific definition of what constitutes a badass. Here's my favorite definition of the term from an Urban Dictionary. It's the most descriptive without being male exclusive, and provides a neat list of rules we can refer back to. A badass isn't someone who wears ripped leather jackets. A badass isn't someone who breaks stuff to look tough. And a badass isn't someone who fights for the fun of fighting.
Are you asking for a challenge? Double Hilly. Ah, my eye!
That is the definition of a poser. Being a badass is completely different. First rule of being a badass. A badass does not talk about being a badass. Period.
First rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about my children of history, man.
This is chemical.
Second rule of being a badass. A badass does not try to be a badass or look tough. A badass simply is a badass. A badass stays true to themselves, always. This means being themselves for themselves, and not being fake to impress others. A badass does not give up. Badasses will always push themselves for the better, no matter how hard it gets. A badass is not a jerk. A badass does not prey on the weak, and shows kindness in return to those who are kind.
I volunteer as tribute!
Note, this rule may be bendable for certain villainous badasses. A badass knows his or her limits. Don't be stupid, you're not Superman. You'll die if you jump off a building.
He's done.
Note, rule does not apply if you are Chev Chelios.
My name is Cheb Chelios. And today I didn't die.
A badass does not make enemies or go looking for fights. They do not engage in fights that aren't worth fighting either.
No ideas around here. You kids today are nothing but punks. Sissified. So quick to pick up a gun. You win some, you lose some. But you live to fight another day.
So, what Mr. Grahame-Smith essentially set out to achieve was to write something that wasn't simply good for a laugh, but one which readers and viewers would be inexorably drawn to through sheer force of badassery. This is smart. A laugh is a good hook, a way to get people to look twice. But it can too often be fleeting, or makes people stay around a while longer, their jaws metaphorically or literally slack, as they gaze upon the force of nature that is the badass, wishing that they too could be so cool. Though in a way, Mr. Grahame-Smith picked an easier task than one might think. Writing a coherent, well-paced story that an audience will stay engaged in, that is the difficult part. The actual task of making Abraham Lincoln believable as badass vampire hunter, that work less difficult, because Abraham Lincoln is already a badass. At least, he is in popular consciousness. For many, the name Abraham Lincoln means the hat, the beard, the cool coat, won 77 years ago. If they do know more, they know he freed the slaves, reunified the nation, and was assassinated for being too awesome. They know him as a larger-than-life, idealized unifier. In other words, as one of the great American badasses. We can see how the Lincoln of popular myth hits our list of badassery in a more straightforward Lincoln film. John Ford's Young Mr. Lincoln. This film may not show anything of the well-known presidential years, focusing instead on his time as a lawyer in Springfield, but it portrays the kind of man that people see Lincoln as, or wish he was. He is self-assured, and yet self-debasing.
I'm not saying you fellas are not right. Maybe these boys do deserve to hang. But with me handling their case, don't look like you'll have much to worry about on that score. All I'm asking is to have it done with some legal pomp and show.
That's all right. Absolutely right.
He has physical power, but uses threats of it sparingly, preferring words over actions.
Gentlemen, did you ever hear about the time in the Black Hawk War when I butted two fellas' heads together and busted both of them?
He's offered help and compromise in the course of his struggles, but never once strays from his principles.
Some older lawyer with more experience to help you out tomorrow?
Are you suggesting that I retire, Judge, or?
I'll speak to Mr. Douglas and get him to act in a sort of advisory capacity.
I'm sorry, Judge, but I'm just not the sort of fella can swap horses in the middle of a stream.
He seems to have innate knowledge of who is good and deserving of his kindness and geniality.
Who are you? I'm your lawyer, ma'am.
And who is a tweed-panted scumbag who will get his in the end.
You say your name's J. Palmer Cass.
Yeah?
What's the J stand for?
John?
Anybody ever call you Jack?
Yes.
Why J. Palmer Cass? Why not John P. Cass? Anything the matter with John P?
No, but...
Does J. Palmer Cass anything to conceal?
No.
Then what do you part your name in the middle for?
Well, I got a right to call myself anything I please as long as it's my own name.
Well, if it's all the same to you, I'll just call you Jack Cass.
Seriously, it borders on a superpower. His ability to distinguish right and wrong is treated with a near divine reverence. Most importantly of all, he seems to do all of this effortlessly, with an air of predestination, as if the world already knows that he is destined for greatness, and is praising him for it before it's even happened. Look at his introduction. Listen to that loving strings piece that kicks in. See how casual he looks as he walks up to the stoop. This is basic film shorthand for, isn't it amazing? He's such a humble man in a humble place. But think of where he'll go from here. Do these people realize whose presence they stand in? If they knew, they'd be jumping his fucking bones right now. God, pump in more strings. We don't want to lose this moment. I would love to get in a full analysis of how Ford's film portrays Lincoln and his mythology, but that would be getting off track for this video. Perhaps another time, when you come to sit with me again. The point I want to make by bringing it up here is that it isn't hard to make people believe that Lincoln is an exceptional man, bordering on the superheroic and even messianic. And Ford didn't even have to add vampires to do it. Looking at it this way, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter doesn't require that much more effort than Mr. Grahame-Smith's previous outing, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Instead of peppering existing text with references to the undead, he stepped up to writing an existing story in his own words, and then peppering that with references to the undead.
I probably have more in common with Snooki than I do with, certainly with William Shakespeare.
Still, I believe there's more going on here than a simple mashup of history and horror. I would not be talking about it if I didn't. It may have been conceived simply, but even such a conception reveals something interesting, I think. Let's get this out of the way first. I do not think that Seth Grahame-Smith is a particularly talented writer. His prose is perfectly readable, but nothing special. On his screenwriting, leaves a lot to be desired, to say the least.
Are you stoned or something?
They tried stoning me, my dear. It did not work.
Instead, what our friend Seth has working in his favor is a keen eye for trends. His first major success story came out at the height of the zombie boom. Before that, he put out books on pornographic film, Spider-Man, horror movie survival tactics, and the Bush administration. Pornography and Spider-Man never go out of style. Lists of quote-unquote horror movie rules have been popular since around the time of Scream. And Pardon My President came out just before the internet stopped caring about Bush jokes. As for Lincoln, Seth has stated outright that his idea came about through a very shrewd observation of what was popular in bookstores. Quote,
"This was in 2009 and it was the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth, so no matter where I was in the country, no matter the bookstore, there were two displays, Abraham Lincoln biographies and Twilight books. This was absolutely the zenith of vampire literature. In a moment of cynical aberration, I wondered if it would have some crazy synergetic effect."
Add to this that the supposedly crazy original premise is in fact more tried and tested than one might think. For a long time, there have been appreciators of schlocky mash-up titles, especially in the age of the internet, when the pinnacle of humor is words like pirate, zombie, and ninja being used as substitutes for actual jokes. Here is a short list of some recent titles that exist. We have Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus, Sharktopus, Snakes on a Plane, Snakes on a Train, Boa vs. Python, Vampire Girl vs. Frankenstein Girl, Alien vs. Predator, Freddy vs. Jason, Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, Marvel Zombies, Marvel 1602, Fantastic Four, Marvel Spider... Okay, Marvel is banned from the list. The Adventures of Dr. McNinja. I was kidnapped by lesbian pirates from outer space! ! Axe Cop. Pirates vs. Ninja Dodgeball. Pirates vs. Ninjas vs. Zombies vs. Pandas. Robot dinosaurs that shoot beams when they roar. Queen Victoria, Demon Hunter. Jesus Christ, Vampire Hunter. Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies. And Abraham Lincoln Hates Werewolves. Oh, wait, I'm so sorry, my mistake. That last one should be Jesus Hates Zombies, Yea Though I Walk, featuring Abraham Lincoln Hates Werewolves. If you need more examples, this sort of thing has its own TV Tropes page. Just go there, you'll get the idea. The main difference between Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and most other pieces of mashup schlock are the production values, the treatment, and the association with an already popular title. What our friend Seth did here was latch onto the segment of the population that would already be drawn to a schlocky, "What even is this?" premise, and attempt to expand the appeal beyond only those who appreciate so bad it's good. Take dreadful concept with potential built-in fanbase, put in more than minimum effort, surprise the squares, profit. This works somewhat, although not as well as it could. To get a truly remarkable work, one needs to be closer to the extreme ends of the quality spectrum. Either it needs to be so dreadful as to be unique and memorable, or it needs to be made with truly remarkable quality, not simply more than minimum effort. To this end, the movie works better than the book. The movie at least has ambitions in style, thanks to the efforts of director Timur Bekmambetov. Whereas the most style the book can claim is the use of a framing device and some humor that never really gets off the ground. Even there, the framing device comes across as a little bit lazy. Here is a summary of the structure of the book for those who have not read it. It begins in the present day, when a literal author avatar named Seth Grahame-Smith is chosen by the vampire Henry Sturgis to receive 10 leather-bound volumes, which turn out to be the long-lost diaries of the 16th President of the United States of America. In these is revealed the secret history of vampires in America and Abraham Lincoln's involvement as a slayer of those creatures. One would think that the story would transition from this point into the diaries themselves. I know I would want to read Abraham Lincoln writing about his vampire hunting exploits for 300 pages. That would show a great fortitude and ambition in writing, regardless of the premise. Instead, Henry wants Seth to write a novel based on the diaries in his own words. Why Henry has waited almost 150 years to do this, or why he wants it done at all, is not entirely clear. Seems that Henry chose Seth because he was a struggling writer, because the two had an interesting talk one day, and because he can competently run a five and dime. In any case, believable or not, writing a novel based on the diaries has nothing to do with getting Lincoln's true story out to the world, and everything to do with having a convenient way out of writing Lincoln's voice consistently. Because, you know, you have to get out another New York Times bestseller before next year. Your agent is breathing down your neck, and Pride and Prejudice and whatever the fuck is not going to pay the bills forever, honey. You know that the secret diary premise is going to draw in your readers, but you don't have the time to craft a Lincoln voice that is believable enough to carry a whole book. It would be much easier to just find some excuse to write in that familiar, bland, faux hip style. Quicker, easier, more marketable. Am I right? The film adaptation, but also written by Seth, at least does away with any sort of cheap framing device. While it is shown at the beginning that Henry takes Lincoln's diary, any narration we get in the film is straight from Lincoln. This is still probably not the most accurate Lincoln, but he is at least consistent, and he is in character enough that you're not taken out of the story. It helps that Benjamin Walker makes a very watchable, compelling Lincoln. He plays the up-and-coming president/vampire slayer with appropriate uncertainty and awkward fumbling, but with a clear capability for great things. Later, when we jump forward into his beard-sporting years, he plays the role with appropriate gravitas and command of the situation. Never mind that in both time periods, he pulls off the required action scenes with such power and with such grace that one can't help wanting to follow the story just to see more of that fancy axe work. Also, and I just have to say it, Walker made the 16th president hot. I don't know about any other lady owls out there, but for this one at least, I would not mind burrowing into his frock coat, if you catch my drift. Fun piece of trivia, by the by. Mr. Walker is a better-known actor on the Broadway stage, and one of his major roles was a title character in the emo punk rock musical Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson.
Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Andrew Jackson! Yeah! That's right, motherfuckers! Jackson's back! A 1, 2, 3, John Madden tried to be an American Idol. Jefferson tried to be a rock star. Madison tried to make a presidency Bible. James Monroe was a douchebag.
So, rest assured, Mr. Walker has all the relevant experience he needs to play a sexy pants historical revisionist American president. Now, if only Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter had featured a song about hunting down Confederate vampires, then maybe we would have a perfect film. 1, 2, 3, 4. Vampirism, kill, kill. Vampirism, kill, kill. Vampirism, kill, kill. Vampirism, kill, kill. This is the age of, this is the age of, this is the age of Lincoln. Take a stand against the undead. Oh. They don't care anything for slaves. And we will keep sweet democracy. Won't let them drink our blood. Drink our blood. Drink our blood. But all joking aside, I do think it's Walker who makes the film work for me personally, in addition to all of the fantastic action. The book didn't do much for me. I'm so sorry, Seth. You're simply not my favorite author. The workings of your mind and your prose are too conventional for all that you try to be original. But the film had from trailer nummer 1, and what had me hooked like fish to the end credits of the finished film was a Lincoln I could get behind, and kinetic action set pieces with cinematography to die for. Also, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, being Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She's not a convincing Mary Todd, but mein Gott, she is a good Mary Elizabeth Winstead. In any case, that is where we finally hit upon some real, original badassery in this project. The Elvish book has elements of badass, but in very superficial way, leans too much on things that were already badass before Seth Grahame-Smith got to them. The film has that too, and that is where the weakest points in the film lie. It has bland side characters, conventional superhero-ish origin story, and lack of meaningful development for anyone but Lincoln. I can forgive a lot of these faults, however, because the film injects a concept with its own original badass, Benjamin Walker as Abraham Lincoln. Just as Henry Fonda made a badass Lincoln in 1939, Walker owns his Lincoln in 2012, never once making you think twice about who you're watching or why he's awesome. He makes it look effortless, not at all forced, and that is the key. He doesn't try to look tough or be a badass. He just is. This alone would be enough to hold up the film for me personally, but admittedly, only just. His action's amazing, but even for me, who goes bananas for high-definition, color-graded, slow-motion action, there comes a point in the film where you start to feel like you've seen it all before, and you start wondering how many more severed vampire limbs are left before John Wilkes Booth shows up. What pushes the film from acceptable to a yes, I can stand behind this is, strangely enough, its respects to history. The film does not do as much as I would like with its issues, but it does enough. It brings to light the dread specters of slavery and war, something that young Mr. Lincoln only mentions in passing.
Pull up stakes and head for Indiana. Kentucky's a mighty fine place to live, but with all the slaves coming in, white folks had a hard time making a living.
In the second half of the film especially, we see more of the plight of the African Americans, and Lincoln's black compatriot Will gets more to do, including equal participation in the film's climactic battle. As well, effects of the Civil War on soldiers are treated with at least solemnity, if not accuracy. There's a scene in the second half where vampires show up on the battlefield for the first time, and we see a soldier on the Union side, holding and looking at a photo of his loved ones. Following the hopeless battles that ensues, we see the field littered with realistically massacred corpses, shot in such a way that it does not glamorize the bloodshed, only observes, before ending on a shot of that same photo covered in blood. It is a standout moment of true horror in film that is otherwise a Gothic-style action movie. So, now that we bring that up, you might ask, why is it okay to tear up some bodies and not others? Because in this case, I believe, some bodies don't represent real bodies, not in the language of film and narrative in any case. They're deliberately inhuman, other. In another story, this could be used to represent the other in a very questionable way. In all honesty, you could still argue that that holds true in this film and make a convincing case. I wouldn't mind talking with you after we finish here in that case. Dinner is not dinner without a good debate, I say. For now, however, I would argue that in this case, the other is more intangible, an ideology rather than an identity. That ideology being that of reactionism, ignorance, and of siphoning the life out of the downtrodden, the different, and the poor, such that the rich get richer, and the status stays quo.
Because the status is not quo.
In this case, the only difference is that the siphoning is literal, and that being dead inside literally means being dead inside. You know, Seth, I'm almost tempted to attribute this to you. I'm not sure if this is what you intended, but the fact is that these themes are present, and whether they're intentional or not, these themes are what saves the film from being merely a strong demo reel for Benjamin Walker. Sometimes we all want a larger-than-life figure to look up to inspire us. The real Abraham Lincoln is certainly that, both in terms of the flawed human being and the pumped-up super being of modern myth. Whether you agree with his tactics or not, he did help in the struggle to eliminate the real-life demons of slavery and ignorance in America. And what is the greater purpose of a monster movie but to give our fictional heroes a chance to stare our real-life demons dead in the eyes, raise up their axe, and say,
I presume you know what I can do with this.
I know what you can do against one. But against 20?
They don't care anything for us, and we will eat through democracy and let them eat our dust, eat our dust, eat our dust.